Hi, I'm Randy Simmons for Ion Arts Channel 2, and today we're going to be visiting the Museum of the American Quilter Society. I said that right. We've got some great new quilts to check out, so come join us. Judy, we have some new quilts on the walls.
Yes, we do.
And tell us about this first one here in complementary color schemes.
The complementary color schemes. This is last year's, 2007's Hancock's of Paducah Best of Show winner at the American Quilter Society Quilt Show and Contest. And it is called Flower of Life by Sharon Schomber. You explain what a complementary color scheme is.
Complementary color schemes are colors that are opposite on the color wheel, and what we have here is like a golden yellow to a violet purple, and those colors are opposing, and they can create a nice color scheme in the sense you have a bright color and a dark color as well. So I like it for that reason, for the contrast. And of course, it's set up on this this off-white material, and I was asking earlier about why is some of this violet faded, because it looks like it sun faded.
Yeah, and
on it.
you would be horrified to find a faded quilt in our collection. And it's not faded. These are hand-dyed fabrics, and you can see how it almost goes from a periwinkle in here down into grape and so forth, and then there's a deeper plum out here. But Sharon does use a lot of hand-dyed fabrics, but that variation, it just adds another sense of depth to the whole piece.
This piece reminds me of almost like grapes in a grapevine. Is that the feeling that this artist wanted
right in here? You know, I haven't really had a chance to talk to Sharon about that, but now that you mention it, that's not a half bad thought. And two, if you look in these sections, and this piece was quilted on a long arm quilting machine, which we discussed last year, but that's where the machine moves. The quilt stays in a frame,
right,
and you actually manipulate the whole machine over top. And she has a number of different fill patterns, and one is this little tiny fill pattern in here. Some people call it bubbles, some people call it rocks, but she's got that in this background, and that kind of echoes the circles up here. And then she has all these circles quilted in this border, and then slightly smaller in some places. There are circles throughout.
Well, there certainly are. I mean, even in this white background pattern, and then even as large as these circles, we see this radial pattern, emanating from them.
And Sharon said this was more of a spiritual quilt for her, because her quilt, Sedona Rose, was the 2006 Best of Show winner. And she did tell me that this one was a more spiritual quilt for her, and she is very tuned in to that side of herself. So maybe unconsciously that circle aspect has come out. And of course, we can read into it anything we want.
Right.
But I think you're right. There might be something with grapes that would be kind of neat.
Can you tell us about the border? Because it looks like it's a really a delicate
You
border.
mean this loop?
Yes.
Well, just as she did in Sedona Rose, she's used cording to create an absolutely phenomenal border. This one's even more complex than the one from Sedona Rose in that it's also knotted. And Sharon's background as a pageant and bridal wear seamstress really, it's flawless. There's no lumps, there's no bumps. It's perfect. I don't know about you, but if I had sneakers on, I can't tie my shoes the same. So that is just so intriguing to me. It's a medallion style quilt, center motif with consecutive borders, but you had another take on the overall, design of the piece. You called it
radial symmetry.
Radial symmetry. And it's formal symmetry, but for instance, this group or this circle, wreath, whatever you want to call it, is not identical to this one. And here's another thing where you see the different shades, in these colors.
Now that you point that out.
Yeah, and so and these are not exactly the same. So there's actually 4 different, wreaths in here or motifs.
Okay, I believe we have some other winners as well.
We do, we do. Let's go over to the Machine Workmanship Award.
Great, let's do that, thanks.
Well, Randy, this is the Machine Workmanship Award for 2007. This is Buckskin by Marla Yeager. This one is also, machine workmanship. This was also quilted and sewn on a sewing machine, but not a long arm machine. The quilting was done with a regular home sewing machine.
Okay.
And, okay, now I'm not going to risk, I love the colors in this. Tell me, what is the color scheme?
Well, it looks like it's closer to an analogous color scheme, which means colors that are very close together on the color wheel. And so what I see here is probably like a violet or red violet to a blue, little touch of green, but the colors are so close together on the color wheel, and overall it has a really low contrast to it, and which I find very attractive to it. The name of it is Buckskin.
Buckskin.
And that gold, this gold color here looks like buckskin. So was that the intention of the artist? I
think so, yeah. And Marla, here again, as in Flower of Life, this has hand-dyed fabrics, and so you get that really nice, variation in colors. And of course, these just have a whole lot of wonderful things going for them. These tie-dye looking pieces. But one of the things that Marla did that I think is so, and a lot of times you don't see this in machine quilting because she's a virtuoso at her craft, and that is definitely obvious. It's a very formal arrangement in the applique work and in the patchwork. The quilting, however, is completely unformal. There is sometimes it's hard for me to get going on this. There are these kind of bubble effects that go here and up through here and up through there, but it's not the mirror image on the other side. And it doesn't, the quilting does not have that radial symmetry that you talked about in the other quilt. For instance, here's an oak leaf cluster or an oak cluster, but there's not a corresponding one over here or on the other side. So these large motifs on the side for the setting triangles, those are there, but the rest of it is she just kind of went with it. And
it's a beautiful quilt.
It makes it a whole lot of fun.
And we have some other interesting quilts as well. How is there an uninteresting quilt?
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. So we're going to check out another interesting one.
Okay. Well, Randy, we've looked at machine workmanship. Now let's take a look at some hand workmanship.
Great.
This is called Organic Garden, and it's by a quilter named Bonnie Keller. And it is a classic applique work. And it's a 4-block quilt. And 4-block quilts were a real popular form back in the mid-1800s. But she's taken, well, for one thing, she doesn't, and Randy bumped into the quilt.
Yikes.
He knows that's a bad thing to do.
I'm penalized.
Yeah, you're penalized. 4-block quilts in the mid-1800s would probably have been in red and green, or at least in a full color spectrum. And Bonnie's done hers in this wonderful, would this be an analogous color scheme?
Red and green, that would be complementary.
Complementary?
Almost
Okay,
complementary
I'm thinking
again.
orange and green, so a complementary again. Anyway, she's done, it's more of a contemporary scheme, but she still has these wonderful floral forms. And she has, in the center of these pieces, she has ruching, which is a gathered technique that's it just adds another dimension to the quilt. And one of the things that Bonnie did, which I thought was really wonderful, was she did, and I can't remember exactly how she did it, but she came back in and used, I believe it was Prismacolor, to slightly color in. And that's just very, very subtle. These little arcs that go around each of these center circles. Here we have circles again.
And that's Prismacolor pencils, right?
I believe so. I'd have to check with her to be sure, but it just frames it just ever so delicately. And that really adds, because you have these delicate tendrils and these wonderful curving forms, and then you have this nice lacy, real faint and delicate, edging. It's all hand worked, it's all hand appliqued and hand quilted. Bonnie has a wonderful quilting stitch, and she has a lot of wildlife in here. She has little moths and dragonflies. Where's the frog? There's a frog up here.
At the top.
There's a bee. I think there's a salamander somewhere. Am I wrong? Sometimes I get lost in these, and that's kind of fun because then it's a discovery all over again. But Bonnie told me this quilt frustrated her. And one day she got so frustrated, she went back out to her garden and was just standing in her garden, looking out at the flowers and thinking, and she felt something on her foot, and she kind of froze. And she looked down, and there was a little mouse at her foot. And she just stood there and didn't move at all. And finally, the mouse moved away. And the mouse left a little present, as mice have a tendency to do. So she actually put the little mouse and one of his little presents on her quilt.
Isn't that cute?
So she was very much inspired by all the flowers and all the animals in her garden. And it has a very classic swag border with more ruching. So she's really employed some hand techniques to really good effect. And there's some more of the shading out here. I don't know if you noticed that on your side.
I did notice that. So there's almost an element of a drawing material. You said Prismacolor, which is what artists use to draw on paper with.
Right.
So I've never heard you mention that before. Is this something that happens frequently?
It's happening more and more. We're seeing more and more quilters going back into either shade to give more added depth to the piece, or just to give it a little added interest. And it's not that they're drawing and it's a definite picture. It's more of an added, just an extra fillip to what they're trying to portray.
And we're talking about handmade. Now I'm assuming that if something's handmade, that's going to take a little bit longer to create than machine made. Is that true?
Yes and no. As you can well imagine, handwork does take a long time, but the kind of machine work, as we saw in the last two quilts, that takes time too. Plus, it's a different physical endeavor. When you're working with a sewing machine, quite frankly, a lot of sewers and quilters have problems with their back. They can't sit and do it for 7 or 8 hours. And some hand quilters could sit and hand quilt for, they'd say, if you don't come and get me away from the quilt frame, I would never leave. So it's a whole different aspect, of your body and the end result.
Well, it's a beautiful quilt, and I really enjoy the floral patterns. Let's look at one that's a little bit more like a painting.
Like a painting.
Like
oh
a
yes.
painting.
This one by Rachel Wexler. This is called Breeze, and this was the Best Wall Quilt Award for 2007. And I don't know what to say. To me, the first time I saw it, I said, wow, I want to live there. There's this wonderful woodwork, and there's these wonderful antique-looking pieces, and of course a 4-poster bed, and the breeze is blowing, and there's a little doggy on the bed. What's not to like about this room?
Well, it's interesting. There's actually 3-dimensional objects on this. For example, like in this curtained area, there's actual fabric sewn on there, and then we have some what looks like trinkets over here on this curtain and the lampshade as well.
And over on whatever this wall decor, I guess you'd call it. And there's foreshortening, like the way the chair is drawn over here, drawn with cloth. Oh, and do you see the pages of the book are blowing in the breeze? And and then you see through the window to the trees outside. So there's a whole lot of depth to it.
There's also a lot of patterning in here, physically patterned to like the wall. This looks almost like wallpaper, which I guess is the intention, that this looks like a wallpaper.
I hadn't thought of that. Because this one also is machine quilted. But that's a good point though, because the quilting in the bed skirt, for instance, and in the down in the chair and in the curtains echoes or is like the flow of the fabric. So that's a very, very good point. And here, it's funny too, because there's a quilt on the bed, and it's quilted, and you can see the quilting, and the quilting is in, it's in perspective. So that's kind of neat. It's kind of like the Morton Salt Girl, a quilt in a quilt.
Well, this is a beautiful quilt, and I think we have some more things to look at too.
Oh, we definitely do. Some new things from it came into the collection this past year.
All right, let's go check that out then.
All right.
What a quilt this one is. I think this is my favorite one that we've seen so far.
And everyone should have their favorite, because they're relating to the quilts. This we were just so fortunate to get. This is a donation by the maker, Shirley
Wow.
Kelly. This is called Flowers of the Crown. Shirley has other quilts in our collection.
Mhm.
She has Pandas Around the World and the Puffins quilt and a quilt in the miniature collection. Shirley gave this to us. She wondered, do you think you would want this quilt? And Kentucky being, the Kentucky Derby, of course we
Absolutely.
want this quilt, so she donated it. And I think for me, it's interesting because it has a picture hanging on a stone wall with a table in front with a book open. So it's like you're in someone's living room, or someone's study. And what this portrays is Affirmed beating Aladar by a nose. And Affirmed takes the triple with the Belmont win. And it's the flowers in here. We have the carnations, the roses, and the black-eyed Susans. And the wreaths that are put around the horses after they win. Those are the 3 flowers for the 3 different races, for the Preakness, the Belmont Stakes, and the Kentucky Derby. And of course, the Kentucky Derby is the Run for the Roses.
And you said she has a nickname for drawing dirt.
Oh, she has a kind of a reputation in the quilt world as she's the one that can do dirt.
So we've got dirt here, and we had mouse poo earlier.
Yes.
Can we say that? We can say that. Yes, we can say that.
Well, you can
Well,
say
I'll find
it.
out if it's bleeped out. Poo.
But, well, they're doing what they know, I guess. But this is another applique work. Shirley does incredible hand applique. And she and her father went to horse events when she was a girl. So this is obviously very much a love of hers. And we're just delighted to have it because, we are just the Kentucky Derby state. So.
And we're going to check out another quilt.
Be quick before we go though. Every year during the AQS Quilt Show Week, there's an auction to raise money for the Museum of the American Quilter Society. And this year, Shirley has donated this lovely quilt, and that auction will be from 3 to 5 on Thursday of Quilt Show Week in the showroom at the Executive Inn.
Wow, that's beautiful. And that's this artist?
This is made by Shirley Kelly. She also, and if you remember Puffins from 2 years ago, the Puffin quilt, which, what's not to like about a puffin?
Yeah, and we've seen that on an earlier show.
Yeah. She also donated this Puffins quilt. And I don't know about you, but either one of these, I would be tickled to own either one of these. So if you think this is what you want hanging in your home, you need to come out to that auction. And there's no charge to get into the auction. It's open to the public.
Wow, if it's free, it's for me.
There you go. And if you want, one of these quilts, come and bid.
Sweet. I just might do that.
Okay.
All right, let's go look at something else you had just around the corner.
Oh, yes. Always more quilts just around the corner.
Okay, this quilt is special in 2 ways. And can you tell us about those 2 ways?
Well, one way it's special is that it's made by Virginia Siciliano. And her husband, George Siciliano, also has a quilt in the collection. They each donated a quilt last year, which we were just so grateful because George's quilt is the miniature quilt, small, medium, at large. So George carries his entire collection of quilts around in one roll-on suitcase, whereas Virginia does more bed-sized quilts, as you see here. This quilt is the name of this quilt is Samarkand, and it's unique in something that we noticed with Buckskin, a previous quilt. It's a low-value contrast overall. You don't have white for a background. You have this, well, not unlike your jacket, you have this almost a tapestry-looking piece back in the background. So and there's really no whites in it, maybe just ever so few of them.
Right, a few flecks of white in there. Yes.
And now Virginia does hand piecing and hand quilting. She did machine piece these points, and she and George will be here for a quilt workshop later this year in June, and they will be teaching how to do precision point piecing.
Great. And they can find information on this workshop at your all's website.
Oh, yes, always, www.quiltmuseum.org.
There we go. There's a plug.
There you go, yeah. So we're pleased to have a husband and wife team represented in the museum. And
that's the only husband and wife team
yes, it is.
represented.
That's right. But you might enjoy seeing, they're not here today, but we do have a workshop going on back in the classrooms.
Do you think they'd mind if we took a peek at the workshop?
I think that's Irma Gail Hatcher, and I think she'd be pleased to have you drop in.
Great, we'll do that. And in this beautiful workshop of a room with all this natural lighting around us, I have Irma Gail Hatcher with me, and this is your workshop that's taking place right now. You want to tell us what's happening in your workshop?
Well, the name of the workshop is Bluebird with Three-Dimensional Flowers.
And what happens in your workshop?
Well, they make a bluebird with three-dimensional flowers.
Well, that's easy enough. We wanted to keep it short. That's to the point.
Right now, they're doing leaves, and then they'll put their three-dimensional flowers on top of the leaves and the stem.
So everybody leaves with a work of art today?
Not today. It's a 3-day workshop.
3 days. Okay.
In doing applique, it takes a very long time.
I see. So do you do a lot of workshops here?
This is my second one,
Great.
and I loved it.
Great. So you came back for more.
Right. These quilts back here have three-dimensional applique on them, if you can get back there. So they'll be making those kinds of quilts, not pieced quilts.
I see. It looks like they're off and working, and everybody's really quiet here too.
Well, you have to concentrate.
I see no loud AC/DC music or.
No, I wouldn't permit that.
Oh, okay, I see. We'll keep it the soft jazz or silence. And this is a much higher contrasting quilt than what we've seen before.
Oh, yes. This is by Jane Sassman. This is Tree of Life, Spring. And this sort of a motif, these, as I think of them, scary fern fronds, these are very much noted in a lot of Jane's work. And these, you know, these are scary looking.
They are. They do have
You
that
know,
sense of.
Yet she has this beautiful, very wonderful curve, and this high contrast. So it's something growing out of the ground. And if you think about it, something that comes out of the ground, a shoot, is in fact an explosion. And you know, grass and other things can break through concrete. So in a sense, life is an explosion, and that's kind of what you get out of this. And Jane's work is full of that sort of, you know, energy. And this is, as we're doing today, this is one of the new quilts in the collection. So we're really pleased to have Jane represented in the collection.
That's a beautiful piece. It's interesting that that's on black as well.
Yeah. Black's hard to work with that way, don't you think?
I think so.
Because it can be just totally dead, but not in this case.
And we have a quilt right next to this one to look at.
Oh, yeah. Muses for the Millennium.
Looks like it's party time at the Mardi Gras.
Ah, that is what it looks like. But this is actually a quilt titled Muses for a Millennium, and it was created by Denise Havlin for a contest. When AQS started their exposition in Nashville, it was the year 2000, and they wanted people to celebrate the millennium with them. So they held a contest, and this was the winner.
Well, it does look like a party time.
Oh, it does.
And I can see where it could be a New Year's party. All this glitter, these triangular shapes and squares with glitter and sequins on them.
And those ribbons at the top, so much fun. And I like how the tambourine at the top works into the ribbons that this figure is holding.
It's almost hidden.
Yeah, because it works right in with the ribbons.
Well, it's a very festive quilt, and I think the colors work really well on it. One thing I did notice, though, is that the artist signed at the bottom. Does that happen usually? Because I haven't noticed that before.
You don't often see quilts signed on the front. Typically, quilts there's usually a pretty complete label on the back. And a lot of it, here again, depends on the quilter. But we've enjoyed having this quilt because, well, it's like you said, it's just festive. And one of the things I like about it is you have this figure in mostly black, so that's a lot of contrast. And then you come over here, and this figure is almost a ghost.
Yeah.
So
You're right.
there is a nice value range with the, with the 5 figures.
And so much color.
So much color. That's, I mean, if you're-
Polychromatic. Many colors.
polychromatic. There you go.
I'm whipping out the fancy terms here.
Yeah, this is an educational, the educational aspect. But Denise did a real nice job, and this was a donation as well. We're very pleased.
You guys are cleaning up with donations.
Well, I think a lot of people are thinking to the future. What's going to happen to their quilts later?
And speaking of the future, we have some other quilts to look at
Oh
too.
yeah, there's always quilts. I think I've said that 3 times.
And our final quilt piece.
Our final quilt is Stars and Stripes Sampler, and this is a donation from Marianne Fons and Liz Porter, a classic sampler quilt.
Wow. And it's absolutely beautiful. Red, white, and blue. Very patriotic.
Yes, very much so.
Well, I wish we had more time to talk about
Oh.
it, Judy, and it has come that time to call it a close.
Okay.
But you'll have us back again,
Yes,
I'm
we
sure.
will. We love
Great.
having
Same
you.
time next year?
Maybe sooner.
All right. We'll work something out.
Yeah.
So with that being said, you guys join us next time for another episode of Eye on Arts. Today we're going to be visiting the American, what is it? Oh man, I got it wrong. I can't believe I did that. Rewind. This is worth workshops right here. Put some in my pocket. Will it fit?